Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you everyone for coming in and attending our annual conference for the Association of Sudanese American Professors in America. I am Muntasir Abbas, professor at Virginia Tech and the president of ASAPA, and I am joined here by the rest of the committee members that will be introduced when they speak. The program this time is a little bit different, and it is intended to look at the use of the tools and methodologies and scientific methods in trying to help Sudan. So we have a very interesting set of speakers, and we will start by one of our own in Sudan, who's very important and is going to give us a very interesting presentation. I will let the secretary of the ASAPA, Professor Bakri Abdel Majid, to introduce her.
Thank you, Montasser. I'm very glad to introduce Hala Al-Karib. She's the regional director of the strategic initiatives of women in the Horn of Africa, organization called SIHA. SIHA started in 1995, and Hala has been the director ever since. She is very active in human rights and women rights. She presented at many venues, and she actually presented at the United Nations to talk about the status of women in the Horn of Africa. So we're very glad to have you, Hala, with us, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm quite honored to be part of this, conference and to be hosted by your association. Such an honor and very pleased. I am the director of the Strategic Initiative for Women in the Horn of Africa, but not since 1995. Yeah, but I've been working for SIHA for the past more or less 15 years. And today I'm going to speak, as I was asked, by the colleagues at ASAPA about the patterns of atrocities in Sudan, but I'm going also to focus specifically on sexual violence as one of the main, I would say, characteristics that has been characterized this current very painful war that's happening in Sudan. First of all, I would like to emphasize that sexual violence and atrocity in Sudan, that are currently happening are not happening in a vacuum. But this violence is happening based on decades of impunity and accommodations of atrocities against civilians, and enabling and emboldening the perpetrators. And as we all know, sexual violence has been used extensively in Darfur. It has been used in South Kordofan. It has been used against girls, underage girls, and I have done a lot of work in Darfur, between 2007 until 2012, and I have seen, that sexual violence has been used as a tool and a strategy of war and a strategy for forced evacuations for Darfur rural communities by the Janjaweed militia, aka currently now, known as the RSF, and being the allies of SAF at the time. So this has been happening, as I said, and it's it was happening in complete impunity. So basically, what I wanted to say that just trying to to establish an introductions here, that the current war in Sudan is a buildup of 20 years, or more of using civilian bodies as a weapon of war. my presentation, I choose to name it our bodies as weapon of war, because this is basically what's happening in this war. Patterns of atrocities committed and documented during the current war, they are massive, and this war, as we all know, the battleground of it is our cities and our villages, and the occupation of Khartoum alone, and and other states, like West Darfur, for example, it transfers, as I said, the cities and the civilians into hostages, and they were caught in the crossfires between the warring parties, but mostly being victimized directly by the RSF. I mean, we have seen execution of civilians inside their homes. We have seen, enforced laborers. We have seen, of course, sexual violence. We have seen, forced evacuations. We have seen random kidnapping. And I'm speaking, based on my position, as someone who's leading a human rights and a women's rights organizations, quite exposed to first-hand informations, and engaged also with international organization who does thorough investigations on this situation. We have also, witnessed a lot of retaliatory war crimes against civilians, and what happened in Al Junaina is quite clear. When civilians, choose to defend themselves, they were, and because we were left quite exposed to that brutality, then, civilians are severely punished. We have also seen it, I don't know if many of you remember what happened in Al-Halfaya, when the members of the resistance committee and the community have chosen to defend the young women who were kidnapped from their homes, and they went after the RSF soldiers, and they managed to return them back. More women has been kidnapped from Al-Halfaya. We have also seen, that communities are, who, for example, welcome army soldiers, next day they will be subject to retaliations by shelling. So this war also, in addition to all this brutality, it has a very retaliatory nature. And we have also, witnessed particularly and first-hand, the fact that communities has been starved and put under siege for days and days. The fact that the population in Bahri were blocked from accessing water, for literally 4 months now. Water tanks are banned from entering, large parts of Bahri, for example. Communities in Darfur were banned from accessing food, and and aid has been disrupted and looted on the way, and so on. So it's a long list of atrocities. So, I mean, the question is, who's responsible? And why did that happen? And how did it happen? I don't know if many of you were in Khartoum when the conflict was erupted, but it was such a surreal situation being there, but I mean, it's you could sense, that the armed militia, the RSF, has been enabled to the point of no return. So currently what's happening, the RSF and their allies of the Janjaweed militias, particularly in Darfur, are the primary perpetrators of violence on the ground against civilians, being in Darfur and being in Khartoum. And this is basically because they were, they have been enabled for a very long time, and they have been equipped and they have been exposed also, to the weakness of, of the, of the states that was, left, after the falling of the NCP, or as a result of the, of 30 years of the NCP rule. So for the past decades, the RSF, their only strategy is to rely heavily on committing atrocities. And this is what they know, and of course, they were supported by Bashir regime and his allies, for almost 20 years in Darfur. And they integrated, those methodologies, and they became, the one of SAF, brutal arms. So primarily, and of course now they have chosen not to be proxies anymore, and we all know the stories, enabled, and they really wanted to lead, but this is what they know, is how to dominate, so the interest is to dominate, and dominations, it means committing atrocities, but also, SAF is equally responsible. It's we have inherited an extremely weak institution, highly corrupt institution, and an institution that constantly failing to perform its constitutional duty in terms of protecting the country and protecting, the resources and so on. Further, SAF is responsible of, being someone who's also exposed and often work on, and my work intersect with humanitarian aid, of obstructing, the humanitarian aid. The level of corruption that's happening in Port Sudan when it comes to, handling humanitarian aid, the mismanagement, the poor capacity in processing the humanitarian aid, and then also the ongoing failure, of securing the aid and making sure that it reach to those who deserve in the states where at least there is no war and there is thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands or millions of Sudanese has gone to take refuge there. So so far, there is a sequence of failure, from SAF. I also believe that other armed movements, have shown massive lack of responsibility and collusion with the current chaos. Just a week ago, the SPLM North continued to shell civilians in Kadugli and in Blue Nile. Many people have killed, including children, and this is documented information. There is also atrocities that was committed by, Darfur armed groups, and it was, atrocities were documented by the community members. Overall, this is a very gruesome war where all armed parties and I would say, affiliated politicians, have shown great disregard, for Sudanese people lives, for Sudanese people peace and security, which is very unfortunate. And this situation also has ramifications on the nature of the international interventions in Sudan, which is so far it's extremely poor, and it doesn't match the level of the crisis. So speaking about sexual violence, I'd use what Dennis Mukwege, Dr. Dennis Mukwege have said, and I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with him, the renowned Nobel Prize winner and the gynecologist from the Congo, who said, and probably I've heard about him. I don't need to say much. He is the one who established the very first hospital to treat survivors of sexual violence in Eastern Congo. So he said that sexual violence is not random occurrence, but a conscientious decision made by individuals and or organizations or communities. Therefore, it can and it should be prevented. So and you have to excuse me, because I think that upcoming part of my presentation might be a bit hard. But this is also, the subject of the conversation that we are currently, involved in. It speaks about atrocity and was always painful. And yeah, so the first report we have received was on April 15, which is the same day the conflict erupted. And the last report we have received on sexual violence cases, actually it was today, just 3 or 4 hours ago, from having this conversation. So that's very telling about the fact that we are dealing with a massive, challenge here. It was the first day of the war, speaking about the first report, and a woman was gang raped inside her home in Khartoum, where she lives with her family. And they were all women. At that point in time, Khartoum was still, fully, people are still inside their homes. It was still occupied by many people. So the screaming and, the chaos has brought in many people. And then the RSF soldiers left quickly, and they couldn't rape the other women in the house. In the same day, so this happens around noon. In the same day, around evening time, in the same neighborhood, aid workers were raped. And then from there, the cases continue to bore, especially from Greater Khartoum and from Al Junaina. In Yala, around early May, we have documented about 25 cases of sexual violence. And it happens within the scale of, 2 days, around when the RSF has opened the WFP food storages, and many civilians and IDPs and women and men, they try to get some food. And yeah, and so the atrocities that's been happening in El Junaina is also an accumulation of a sequence of atrocities since 2019. But between June 10 and June 14, El Junaina was completely destroyed. And we are all aware of the killing of Al Junaina Wali and the elders of the Masalit tribes, but also hundreds and hundreds of civilians inhabiting the city, including some colleagues who are civil society members and human rights defenders, and medical doctors and governments workers. Just the nature of atrocities that's been, just a quick comment here, that's been happening in Darfur. It's always been, it's about sexual violence. It's about, eliminating and killing figures, but also it's about destroying the infrastructure. And we have seen that clearly repeated in Khartoum. Like for the past 20 years, rural schools were burned, clinics were completely destroyed. Every village that the Janjaweed entered, this is basically their behaviors. Try to remove, any civil, structure, any public service structure, courts, all these things that they don't feel, they can relate to, or it limits their domination. They just destroy it completely. And this is what happened in El Junaina. One of the most gruesome, violations against civilian, it happened on May 14, when Dr. Adam Zakaria's Ishaq, probably you have heard about this. He's a 38 years old medical doctor, and human rights defender. He's someone who really gave a lot to his community. Adam was killed with his 13 patients in Al-Inqaz clinic in Hay Al-Jamarik في الجنينة. And Amnesty International latest report has explicitly spoke about this incidents, that the 14 of them, Dr. Adam and his patients, were shot by the militia. So, I mean, yeah. According to many eyewitnesses, according to friends, according to colleagues, the atrocities that were committed in El Junaina between June 10th and June 14, and according to Human Rights Watch investigations, Amnesty, it's definitely those sequence of events amounts into a genocide. Sexual violence happened in the most horrible way in El Junaina. Young women were gang raped inside their homes in front of their families. A woman activist and part of our network, she told us that her neighbor was, her home was attacked by the RSF. They came in, they found the woman and her children, and they took over the house. And they told her that we are not going to kill you, but you have to provide services for us. The woman was gang raped with her children around for days. And then she was ordered to clean their wounds and treat the injuries and cook for them literally for over a week until she was able to flee. According to her neighbor, the eyewitness who told us the story, that she is in a very, very bad mental and psychological shape. So far, from our side, one of the most difficult things is to verify, and also very painful thing. I mean, it's completely. I've worked in this region on sexual violence, but when you work on your own in your home, when you work, yeah. So, and it also reminded me of the days, when we were working in Darfur, in rural Darfur. But right now, we're dealing with next door neighbors. We're dealing with friends. We're dealing with people we know. So confirmations and collecting information about sexual violence cases are really difficult, and it takes time and patience. And basically, in all the research that was done on sexual violence, that during conflicts, that it keeps coming. So it might take months and months and years. And so every day you encounter one case here, two cases here. So we have documented about 90 cases. Most of the cases, and when I say documented, either we had a conversation with the victim/survivors or direct immediate family member. Most cases in Greater Khartoum that we have documented, and as I said, this number keep increasing. And also we have loads, to deal with. Like yesterday, for example, a medical center in Khartoum, and those are not confirmed cases. There is loads of cases that's not confirmed. It takes a lot of effort. Yeah, they shared with us 18 cases, and they said those cases happened, as of early August. And yeah, and when you're documenting, it's not about what happened, what patterns of rape, and the circumstances around it, and who are the perpetrators, and you have to think about how you can support, and where is she, and and try to mobilize your network and so on. So I would say that almost 40% of the documented cases of rape are gang rape cases. And it's really important to understand that although rape during war is an ancient crime, it's only in the last decades that social scientists have begun to study the pattern in which soldiers and rebel groups rape. And I think basically, I think that started with the war, in Bosnia. Some commanders order rape as a military or a political strategy and specify the target. The RSF has done this for a very long time on behalf of SAP and on behalf of the NCP in Darfur, in terms of who to rape. In this case, we see a high, our case currently, what's happening in Khartoum, we see a high prevalence of gang rape. And I think one of the reasons why the RSF are quite comfortable, raping women, first of all, because I think, and especially gang raping women, I think there is no shame on committing, so when there is no shame, it's not snatching a woman and raping her somewhere where you're not seen, but it's like 3, 4, 5 men, sometimes 8 men raping one woman. So it means that this is something that's, clearly instructed to do as a war strategy. The other thing, it's also an indication that, as I said, they are quite comfortable, and because they were never held accountable, and contrary, they were rewarded for this. They were rewarded initially by SAF, post 2019, rewarded by the by civilian politicians, and rewarded by the international community, and so on. So they were never in a position where they were really being held accountable. So yeah, there is also a quote that I think it's very important to remember, that unlike a stray bullet, rape is always intentional. It was never a coincidence. It's always intentional. And gang rape happen, when there is no shame, as I said, and there is no fear. And it's also an expression of power. It's a deep desire to eliminate, and it's a really functioning fear strategy where people have to leave. We all had to run away because we anticipated that this is going to happen. Sorry for taking long. So I'm just going to, before I go to the questions and answer, I just drafted a few recommendations and just broad suggestions. The impact of rape and sexual violence extends generations, and it affects the perpetrators and affects the victims. Affect the perpetrators because you contribute to creating generations of perpetrators, of men who normalize rape. And this is what happened in Sudan, that rape was literally normalized, and then you create a generational trauma within the victims. And we have seen that. I worked with daughters of women who were raped in South Sudan, Somalia, in Darfur, and the trauma passes from one generation to the other, and stopping the cycle of sexual violence in Sudan, stopping the cycle of rape. It really presents a very significant challenge. It's vital for Sudanese to recognize that rape does not only occur in Sudan during conflict, but it happens and is quite prevalent, even during times of peace. Violence against women and girls is a persistent issue in Sudan, and with no consequences. We have one of the worst laws on earth when it comes to violence against women and girls. We are one of 3 countries in the world with Iran and Somalia, and that we did not sign or ratify any of the international mechanisms that guarantee protections of women and girls, including the Convention of Eliminations of All Forms of discrimination against women. So we have a very, very discriminatory, laws, extremely discriminatory policies based on 30 years of the, NCBs and domestic brotherhood ruling. So it's our structure of governance has actually created this, as I said earlier. So the other important thing that must be done now, and this is, I'm saying this because it's very important, when we speak about political agenda, when we speak about, stability in Sudan, we cannot just do that very superficially. We really have to address those critical issues, that can actually drive the country through into a real change, into stability. At the moment, I think it's really important to support the survivors and the victims, or the victims of sexual violence in Sudan, and advocate for protections of women, girls, and children in the country. It's really important. There is something that I haven't said, I forget to say, that sexual violence does not happen against women alone. Sexual violence happens against men. And in Sudan, sexual violence happened against men, in conflict and during peace times. And it's, unfortunately, it takes men even longer time to speak about, the sexual violence that happened against them. And in terms of, supporting survivors, there is so many ways, making sure that sexual and reproductive health medications and services is available, advocate and raise our voices very loudly, and and put pressure that those are priority. Sexual violence must be part of the political process conversations in Sudan. Any talks to resolve the ongoing conflict must address the issue of impunity and the conditions of civilians at the moment, and the situation of civilians. One of the things that's really, I find it extremely sad, that most of the statements that comes from politicians and civilian politicians come very flat. It's and very arrogant and very disregarding to the pain, and to the level of atrocities. What's happening right now, so it didn't happen, I believe, over 150 years ago. This is very gruesome, for our, capitals, for our big cities to be attacked in this way, and for Sudanese to experience that level of violations. So there is no acknowledgement. So a political discourse and a political narrative that would not acknowledge the pain of Sudanese people, would not acknowledge, what they are, their grievances and their suffering, it's, in my view, and will not reflect their aspiration for peace. I don't think it's capable of leading any the country for any transformation or for any peace and stability. Accountability and justice are critical for holding the perpetrators accountable, but also accountability and justice are really important for healing and as a foundation for peace. For decades, Sudan has faced challenges with militarizations and recruitment and mobilizations. Unfortunately, as a country, we've never undergone any process of demobilization. South Sudan existed since 2011, and they have been massive investment in demobilization and disarmament until now in South Sudan. But Sudan has never been, with all those pockets of war, with all those armed groups and militia, we have never undergone our country any serious process of demobilizations. As Sudanese citizens, discussing peace and security issue is crucial for maintaining, stability and for peace and for the future of Sudan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hala, very much for the presentation. Maybe we can open the floor for a few questions. I will start with the question. Here in the U.S., crimes of sexual violence cannot be dropped, even if the victims come like 50 years later and report them. The crime is still valid, and the perpetrators could be tried and charged. So is there anything in the like in the international documentation that's also the case? So you have been reporting on many cases. Can this be brought to justice 10 years from now?
Thank you very much. Would you like me to answer one by one, or should I take maybe 2 or 3 questions? Would that work, or it's up to you?
Yeah. Let's see. I see Salman Baldo is raising his hand. Come on, Salman.
أهلا وسهلا. الشكر للأخت هالة على هذا الاستعراض الوافي والمؤلم بحقيقة لحجم الجرائم المرتكبة ضد النساء والأطفال، لأنه عديد من ضحايا الاغتصاب في إطار هذه الحرب غصر. فأود أن أتوجه للتوجه العام لهذا المؤتمر فيما يختص بالخطوات العملية التي يمكن أن تقوم بها يعني المعالجات العلمية للمشاكل المترتبة عن الحرب. فيما يختص بموضوع استعمال الاغتصاب كسلاح في الحرب، هناك طبعا ضرورة توثيق كل من هذه الجرائم، وهذا دور تقوم به الآن منظمة الصيحة ومنظمات حقوق الإنسان الأخرى بشكل وافي. لكن الخطوات العملية المطلوبة لموضوع إنهاء الإفلات من العقوبة هي يعني إرجاع هذه يعني البحث التوثيقي لجرائم الاغتصاب إلى التحقيق الذي تقوم به المحكمة الدولية. وأيضا حكومة السودان أو ما تبقى من حكومة السودان كونت لجنة للتحقيق في لجان في جرائم الدعم السريع، والنائب العام كون أتيام لتلقي الشكاوي يعني فيما يختص بهذه الجرائم والجهات المرتكبة لها. هذا طبعا أبروتش إلى حد كبير انتهازي لأنه من جانب واحد، ولكن هناك حوجة لاختبار هذه الآلة بأيضا تقديم وثائق بحثت للجنة التحقيق الحكومية فيما يختص بجرائم الاغتصاب التي ارتكبت. مهم جدا التعرف على قادة القوات للدعم السريع في المناطق المختلفة. يعني القائد العسكري لمنطقة كافوري للدعم السريع أيام هذه الحرب معروف بالاسم، كذلك الغائد لمنطقة حلفاية. كل المناطق التي مورست فيها عمليات الاغتصاب الجماعي يجب أن التعرف على القيادات العسكرية للدعم السريع في تلك المنطقة، لأنه يمكن من الممكن جدا محاسبة هذه القيادات العسكرية بموجب مسؤولية القيادة لما ارتكبته وحداتهم أو الوحدات أو الأفراد في هذه الوحدات التابعين للمنطقة العسكرية اللي هم مهيمنين عليها. فهذه أشياء عملية يمكن القيام بها لملاحقة كل هؤلاء يعني الذين ارتكبوا هذه الجرائم البشعة. شكرا جزيلا.
Just a reminder for everyone, يعني we're conducting the conference in English because we have international presenters as well. So Hala, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So to answer your question, Dr. Bakri, the current legal framework in Sudan, as I said, is not prepared or capable of of addressing the current sexual violence crimes. As Dr. Suleiman has said, there is a level of opportunism, and political agenda as usual, in terms of encouraging people to come forward and report. And as I said, the structure and the legal system itself is not really in a good shape to absorb that. There is a long history of trust as well, this history of mistrust between survivors of sexual violence and the legal system in Sudan, where typically survivors, when they report, they tend to be victimized, first of all because the law has a tendency to criminalize the survivor, and because of the stigma and all the prohibitions and and so on. So a lot of the survivors, they would rather not to come forward now. But as you said, engaging with international mechanisms is critical. And Suleiman, thank you very much for your suggestion about what can be done now. I think that's a process that we are trying to collaborate as much as possible with as many international organizations that are working on maintaining credible records. As you said, Dr. Bakri, that sexual violence crimes, is it's one of those crimes that it will not, it doesn't drop, and can always be addressed and things like that. So we are trying to do that. I think there is something that's really very important, to take with us. Just speaking about the issue of the distrust between the, Sudanese investigative mechanisms and the legal system in Sudan. The example of what happened after the disbursement of the sitting in 2019, and لجنة فض الاعتصام, or the committee to disperse, the committee that looked at the atrocities that happened during Khartoum sitting. And it was one of the very difficult and complex process for survivors of sexual violence to approach the committee by then. And it caused a lot of pain. We have cases of survivors, that they committed suicide, following being, the meeting with the committee. So there is a huge need to build capacity, but also to expose more actors who are working on the issue of justice, on the issue of, of transitional justice and legal remedies, to how to handle and address this issue. Yes, over to you.
Thank you very much. And Bakri, we have Nathaniel here.
Yes, thank you, Hala. We have this distinguished speaker, Mr. Nathaniel Raymond. Nathaniel is the executive director of the Humanitarian Research Lab at the School of Public Health at Yale. He's also a lecturer in the Department of Epidemiology. His research interests focus on the health implications of forced displacements, methodologies for assessment of large-scale disasters, including pandemics and conditions of war, and the human rights and human security implications of information communication technologies and vulnerable people. He has quite an extensive experience in this field. He's covered many areas of conflict, including current conflicts in Ukraine and in the Sudan. We thank you so much, Nathaniel, for joining us today.
It's an honor to be here. I wish we were all together in the same place. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So it is the most crucial moment for the people of Sudan, particularly those in Khartoum, Omdurman, and Darfur, at which I address you today. Since the conflict between RSF and SAF broke out in April, my team and I at the Humanitarian Research Lab at the Yale School of Public Health have, in collaboration with the U.S. Department of State through the Conflict Observatory Project, we have been monitoring events in Sudan for the past now over 12 weeks, almost 16 weeks. During that time, and let me flip my screen here, that's better. During that time, we have had 3 missions. The first mission has been to support the negotiations at Jeddah between SAF and RSF, brokered by the United States and Saudi Arabia, particularly monitoring compliance with past ceasefires and the Jeddah Declaration. As we all know now, that those ceasefires and the Jeddah Declaration have done little to end or to even slow the targeting of civilians, the destruction of hospitals and civilian dwellings, and the displacement of millions of vulnerable people. Our second mission has been monitoring the violence in Darfur. And since we started our program, we have documented almost 30 burned villages. We have also documented the intentional killing of civilians, particularly men, and evidence of intentional targeting of humanitarian facilities, including in Nyala, El Fasher, and most notably in El Geneina, where we have also documented the El Geneina massacre that occurred in June in multiple ways. I want to talk about the third mission and then go back to Darfur. The third mission is to support the delivery of humanitarian assistance and to provide analysis that will help agencies basically identify people in need and be able to deliver assistance to where they're located. And you're hearing my dog in the background, and I apologize. As it relates to Darfur, what is important to note is that since the fighting began, comms in Darfur, telecommunications and internet have almost totally collapsed. Additionally, the rainy season has begun. In most cases in Darfur, we are seeing now almost 90% cloud cover. That is very important because it gives RSF tactical advantage. The RSF right now are moving under cloud cover with almost low to no cell phone signal for civilians. And how they are attacking is almost identical. We can tell this because we're using satellite imagery and advanced sensors. They are attacking almost identically to the 2003-2005 period. They come in strength, they surround villages, they separate any potential resistance or defense forces, wear them down, and then they engulf from all sides. And they burn the structures to the ground, often in a period of 18 to 24 hours, as we saw in the case of Serba. In Serba, they took 5,200 structures and burned 4,400 of them or more in under 16 to 18 hours. They went to Serba following civilians who had fled Janina. And this is very important. At the beginning of the RSF activities in Darfur, they appeared to be displacing people who ran towards the border. Now, in the past few weeks, civilians are running internally. In the case of those who were at Tawila, when it was razed to the ground, they've now fled to El Fasher and are seeking refuge at schools in El Fasher. And so we have a situation where in the first phase, civilians who could make the border attempted to make the border. Now they are moving to other communities, such as we saw in the case of Serba, or they are moving to places with SAF installations, such as in the case of Nyala and El Fasher, and they are seeking refuge near there. Let's talk about SAF. Right now, as we see in Nyala, SAF is being surrounded by RSF, and they are engaged in an artillery exchange on a daily basis between RSF and SAF. RSF are moving into homes, civilian homes, and SAF is firing upon them. On early next week, we will release a report documenting artillery damage and civilian impact in Nyala. What we can see already is that RSF and SAF are in close proximity to each other, and that the SAF division in Nyala is firing howitzers at the RSF that are moving into civilian dwellings. The situation has been exemplified by MSF, Doctors Without Borders statements in the past 3 days saying that we're in the midst of a humanitarian catastrophe. In Nyala, the hospitals are overwhelmed. They are running out of supplies, and they need to be able to evacuate civilians from Nyala. Why I am focusing on Nyala, besides the human reality there, is that I believe Nyala is a preview of coming attractions for what will happen in El Fasher. If Nyala falls, RSF will likely move on El Fasher soon thereafter. At El Fasher, as many of you know, there are 3 camps, including Abu Shuk and Zamzam. And as you exit Nyala, there is Kalma camp. So we are talking about a large amount of IDPs, as many as over 750,000, plus the civilians who fled from interior towns such as Tawila to seek refuge in the city. At this moment, if there is not a protection of civilian force deployed, if there is not a protection of civilian sites set up in El Fasher, we can reasonably assume that Sudan Armed Forces, who right now are trying to hold on to their remaining bases, including Zelenji, Nyala, El Fasher, and other small garrisons, that SAF will likely be surrounded in El Fasher like they have been surrounded at Nyala. We all know that SAF is not capable nor willing of protecting the people in these places. SAF helped put them in these camps and were participants in the genocide of 2003, 2005. And so SAF is not going to be able nor willing to provide these people civilian protection. So the question now is who is going to play that role? The work we have done on Conflict Observatory has been briefed up at the highest levels of US government, other entities. The Troika has been briefed to the UN Security Council and is presented publicly. A lot of what we do is not public, but our public findings summarize anything that we have privately generated. As I have learned over many years, including during the Satellite Sentinel project, when we monitored with George Clooney, when we were at Harvard Humanitarian Initiative, when we monitored South Kordofan, Blue Nile, Abyei, Unity State, that information can activate political will, but information itself cannot create political will. And at this point, we do not need more information to know what is going on. We know what is going on. RSF and allied militias in Darfur are engaged in crimes against humanity, tantamount to genocide, targeting Masalit, Fur, Sagawa, Oranga, and other non-Arab groups, and are using tactics, techniques, and procedure that are almost identical to the 2003-2005 genocide. There is no doubt about it. And I have had the opportunity, unfortunately, to review imagery from the ground, including from El Geneina. And with satellites, we can see roofs, we can see burned buildings, we can see weapons, we can see large groups of displaced people. But I have seen the images from the ground in places where thousands of men and boys, and in some cases women, but primarily men and boys, have been massacred wholesale in multiple waves of attack. And they have been left to rot on the streets of their hometowns. We are running out of time, and the hour is already very late. At this point, we need to stop asking what is happening and to start asking what are we going to do about it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Nathaniel. We can open the floor for questions now. My question to you also, Nathaniel, recently we're hearing about also conflicts in South Darfur, Kordofan, and so some people are saying these are perpetrated by the Al-Hello groups, which is the SPLM North. Is there any monitoring or any proof of things like that happening? This is mainly in Kadugli.
Yes, it is clear that there is a three-way fight happening in Kadugli between Al-Hilu elements of SPLA, SPLM, and RSF elements in some cases, and SAF. And so to go back a little bit, earlier in the conflict, Kadugli was in many ways an exception if you compare it to El Obeid. And it was one of the major urban centers outside of Khartoum, Omdurman. Also, I would say a lot of Jazeera, Wamadani had escaped much of the violence. But now we are seeing Kadugli increasingly resemble El Obeid. The fighting is not to that level, but it's important. It's very important, Professor, that you bring this up, because if we look at Al Fasher, if Al Fasher falls to the RSF, then that road from Al Fasher to Dillinj is open. And if then there is RSF movement on the Al Fasher Dillinj axis, it will significantly change force projection and deployment as it relates to southern movement towards Kadugli into the Nuba. And so we have to watch very carefully two things. What is the Al-Hilu group doing? What are they trying to achieve right now in this current chaos, which I cannot make a full assessment on at this point. I don't know if Abdulaziz himself can make a full assessment on it at this point. But the fact is that we have the dynamic set within Kadugli itself and Nuba to Kauda, right? So we have that as box one. Box two is what happens in Darfur, and I think for what Western analysts, so basically white guys in New Haven like me, we fall into the danger of seeing these regional boxes that you as Sudanese know more clearly how they connect. Where we're like, here's Darfur, here's South Kordofan, here's Blue Nile, as if they are entirely separate, right? And what I'm saying is that we know that one regional dynamic affects the other. And we have to get ahead of the ball here in terms of thinking about how do we anticipate how changes in the Darfur dynamic, particularly on the geography, are going to cause a mutation of the situation from the Dillinj corridor south through Karasana, et cetera, to get worse. At this point, I'm not going to predict specifically what's going to happen, but I can predict this, which is SAF has no ability to stop RSF in Darfur. They cannot do it. They are not receiving resupply of personnel. They are not receiving resupply of ammunition. We have seen recently the garrison commander, Nyala, was allegedly killed by his own men. We have seen defection of SAF walking across the border to Chad. So if the only thing stopping RSF from coming into the fight more, with more force on the South Kordofan side, is SAF garrison in Darfur, then we can reasonably assume it's a matter of time before RSF is on that road and heading south.
Yeah, that is
that much is true. That much you can take to the bank. And once it hits the dry, once the dry comes, they will have significant maneuver advantage that they do not have now. In many ways, the rain is a double-edged sword. On one hand, the rain slows RSF. On the other hand, it provides them cover. And then the other element is that when they get stuck, well, then they fight where they are. But as the rains end in 4 to 6 weeks, they will be projecting further and faster. And they have the last time around, 20 years ago, they did not have, as Janjaweed, they did not have the level of vehicles that they have now. And so they have significantly more technicals. So they have many more helices, and they're faster with further projection.
Yeah.
Nathaniel, thank you. I want to jump in with a couple of questions. So this is very good information. My two questions, the first one is about the tools and the data, because one of the one of the elements that we're trying to do at ASAPA is to get engaged in, as academicians and researchers and so on, in trying to help in some ways. Are there available tools and data, or should we just be looking at the briefing that you guys are putting out? Are there tools or data that is classified, for example, that we can only get the post-processed data from it, or what's the situation about that, first of all, before I ask my second question?
Yeah, and these are critical questions, sir, which is, okay, let's do the last part first. There, we have sensor capabilities, and we produce information from sensor capabilities that we do not make public. And that's for two specific reasons I'll give you, but the headline is civilian protection. We have granular perspective on RSF and SAF military dispositions to understand how that affects civilian threats. We do not put out any information we have that allows us to see that granular level, because we don't want to give either side tactical advantage. So, for example, in Nyala, we know where the guns are in terms of we have a good sense of where artillery is being fired from. Next week, we're not going to show those guns. But what are we going to show? We're going to show the artillery damage and the forensic evidence that matches up to what we think the guns are. And that should be public. The aggregate effect of the bombardment should be public, but the fire points, that's only going to help RSF. And so that's one thing we don't show. The other is information that shows how we're collecting data about tactical movements and when we're collecting it. We do not want RSF or SAF to get smarter or more clever than they already are, and they're already sometimes pretty clever. So those things, we have a rule, which is we don't always have to show, and we don't always should show the method on that when it has a risk to our ability to watch them. But we should always show, this is the golden rule, we must always show when there is civilian impact, and we must always demonstrate how we evaluated civilian impact, even if we can't show all the methods. And so with the Nyala report, I think it's going to be a very good example next week when Nyala comes out, where we're walking that fine line between how do we show the receipts, show our math here on how we got to civilian effect without showing the exact force positions and why we know where they are. But we've been struggling a lot to go to the other part of the question. We've been struggling a lot internally with the fact that we have a relatively rich corpus of open source data about things that we can't confirm and things we can't see from satellite. So SGBB or CSRV, extrajudicial executions, torture, child soldiers, small scale rather than massacre level, but small scale killing of civilians, particularly through airstrike, where we do not have the airstrike confirmed. This is especially in Bahri, Khartoum, Omdurman, but Bahri neighborhood, where we have a lot of information about strikes that we haven't confirmed. And so what we're really struggling with is how can we make that more available to groups exactly like all of you, who may be able to bring, through your unique skills, your ground knowledge, through the resistance committees, through your networks, how can we leverage that rather than keep it in a server in New Haven? How do we get it into your hands? So in the next, hopefully at most 2 weeks, hopefully less than that, we're going to start producing SITREP products, so situation reports that summarize available open source resources so researchers can pull that down, do an RSS feed, and do their own work with it. We should not be holding on to that. Additionally, we want to think about, can we build databases for groups of researchers that have more temporal spatial data, so time and place, where we can give it, and we're working on that. That is actually going ahead. So how do we support things like death registry, which is extremely crucial right now? How do we support folks in the community response teams on giving them tools for the data they already have? So besides our data, the best data is coming from ground folks and ground groups on the community level who are collecting this with almost no, and I'm going to criticize some governments here, the level of support that is being received, and there's a lot of logistical, operational, there's always logistical, operational, political, but the point here is that we need to do more to help those who are on the front line, hospitals, community health workers, who are working despite being under attack. They have not given up. We owe them. It is our responsibility. It is our honor to support them in getting the data they're already collecting safely out of Sudan and leveraging it to make better decisions. And right now there has been prioritization for operations like the one we're doing, which is great, and we have had effective impact, we like to think, but we are not as important as the folks who have an Android, WhatsApp, and have a group of 20 friends in Cairo that they are getting that information out every day. So how can we structure that information so it's admissible in court? How can we structure that information so on things like cholera, things like deceased found on the street, so it can be used to inform decisions, but also, this is really, really important, also provide families who are desperately searching for missing people any information that may be sitting in an Android a WhatsApp chat group right now. How do we get that into the hands of families who are looking for loved ones, right? So I'll turn it back to you, but so we're trying to make sure that we're not the only game in town, because we're not, and that we are getting resources and getting data assets in and out to the ground level to support that community response. Because at the end of the day, no matter what we're doing with satellites, the community response on the streets of Khartoum, Omdurman, Obeid right now, from the CRTs, from the committees, is the single most important thing. And it has not been prioritized by the international community. And the lack of inclusion of those groups in peace negotiation, the lack of inclusion of those groups in funding mechanisms, there's been efforts to try to remedy that, and efforts by the United States government, which are important, but we must do more.
Excellent. So I guess, Nathaniel, we would like to know more about the SIT reports and so on, like where we can look at them.
Yeah, but we will communicate that to you directly.
Excellent, thank you. The second question, and that's a brief one. From your observation, does it seem like there is some intelligence going on, or is it more like fighting as it just happens? I just wonder all the time, like,
that's a great question.
People really supported by intelligence as they are moving forward and taking over things, or is it just happening as it goes?
In the early phase in Khartoum, it was very interesting because there was an effort to use UAVs by both sides. And so that was the first time I had seen in an East African context like this, especially in East African urban warfare. It was really informed by what had been happening in Ukraine, where both sides were not only taking UAV footage of each other, they were putting it online. And so if we think back to the early phase when, I don't know if you remember, it was, I think, a Sukhoi or a MiG got shot down by a MANPAS, Man-Portable Air Defense System, by RSF. There was in intelligence reconnaissance aerial intelligence reconnaissance going on by SAF, which was causing RSF to try to countermand that aerial reconnaissance. And then we see the manpads in Khartoum, right? And so was that Sukhoi that went down, and it was, we saw a public UAV shot of the Sukhoi down, and there was an Mi-24 shot down as well in this, in someone's backyard by a wall with a mural on it. We could see the mural even from space, we could see the mural in the Mi-24 in the backyard. And what was very interesting about that is that often the ground micro UAV stuff that was going on live was better than what we could see. And was provided. And so as time has gone on, we have seen both sides engaging in what we could call reconnaissance action on the other. It is not it's either less or obvious. I can't say which it is. It's either less obvious or happening less in the phase we're in now than it was in that initial close combat. But that it was very clear both sides were trying to get an intelligence advantage on the other. And there was definitely clear back and forth reconnaissance missions.
Great. Thank you. I see Professor Abdurrahman Shoaib. Go ahead with your question, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Raymond, Mr. Raymond, for your presentation. Really enjoyed it. And thank you for your contributions. I just want to report that I'm from Kadugli. I walked Kadugli to Rubaiyat during my childhood after our cattle at that time, so I know that place very well. And I wish the best for our nation, all parts. My question is, there was a famous, say, never again. After every atrocity or genocide, the politicians always say never again. And is this what's happening in Sudan now, like the inaction of major powers in the world, is that proof that it will continue to happen again and again and again without action? So can you comment on that? So what do you see as a possibility of intervention that will stop all these atrocities, or at least reduce them to a level where they can become less lethal to the average person? Thank you.
Thank you. And it's always good to hear from someone from Kadugli. For my team, the response to the Kadugli massacre in 2011 was a critical moment in all of our lives. One of my imagery analysts has over his couch a near infrared image of the mural, or the big sign up on the side of the mountain, which in Arabic says, "Welcome to Kadugli, town of love and peace." He has that over his couch. And so Kadugli is a very important place for all of us. And we hope there's peace there in all of Sudan. When people say never again to me, I get very angry, because our daily reality is not never again, it's all the damn time. And so the fact of the matter is that right now, that there has been, and this is a predictable and unacceptable arc, this question from governments, is it happening, right? And then we go to the next phase. Okay, we had, after El Janena, yeah, it's happening, right? And then we go to the next phase, which is, but how bad is it? And if any of you have ever read St. Augustine's famous line, "How many angels dance on the head of a pin," from the City of God, I say, like, how do 3 more people need to die? Is it 5 more villages until it's bad enough, right? And so when I'm in these briefings with different governments, I'm saying, just tell us the number. Do we need to have 2,000 more dead? Because we will go find that. and so we're in this phase of, measuring the badness. Is it bad? Is the bad happening? And is it happening to what legal standard? How bad is the bad? And then after that, we get to the phase we're entering now, which is, well, there are complexities. Okay, and what are the complexities? Well, it's not Ukraine, is the first complexity. The second complexity is UN Security Council and the current dynamics there in terms of veto in Chapter 7. The third complexity is logistics, force, mandate, right? Who's going to go? Who's going to get them there? Who's going to fund it, right? And who is it a Chapter 7 force? Da, 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 da. And then we get into this thing, which is, well, this is what happens in Africa. You know, this is just how it is. And every day I am blowing the horn and raising the alarm that what we are talking about in terms of Al-Fashir and Nyala is a level of threat that is hundreds of times bigger than massacres in massacre response operations where we had force on the ground, right? Srebrenica, this blows Srebrenica in terms of potential risk to civilians out of the water. Kadugli massacre 2011, this is significantly bigger. And so the issue is, at this point, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where the cavalry is going to come from. I don't know how they're going to get deployed, and I don't know if it's going to matter. We've seen Mini Manawi and the joint forces are clearly deploying where they can. We have seen evidence of civilians leaving Al-Fashir. We are seeing evidence of SAF digging in, right? We're seeing all the things we need to know. And Nyala is just Al-Fashir, but smaller, right? And so I count the news articles all the time, and I compare Ukraine coverage and coverage on Buka to coverage on Sudan. And it makes me very, very angry because right now, what is happening should be on the front page of every single newspaper. It should be, and I want to thank CNN, who did a giant report on El Janena, a special investigation. They put it on CNN Live with Jake Tapper. They are doing a documentary on the current violence in Sudan to go out for UN General Assembly. So CNN is trying hard, but that's just one organization. And we don't have time for a media campaign here. We need a tactical response and to protect civilians. And so I don't know what's going to happen, but I think what's very important is that Congress. So my good news word here is that getting your constituency from this organization to contact their members of Congress is essential, and say, you need hearings on Darfur. I think of Frederick Douglass, who in writing about the abolition of slavery, he wrote, "Power concedes nothing without a demand." Power concedes nothing without a demand. Right now, there is not a demand from the American people for clear, decisive action in Darfur. We need to make the demand.
That's a very good
Great. Thank you so
recommendation.
much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. This was really great, and we definitely appreciate this very much. So thank you again. It has been a pleasure talking to you, and we'll keep in touch.
Shukran.
Shukran. Shukran.
Thank you, and thanks also to Kava Khushnud for helping with all this coverage in the Sudan.
Well, I want to thank all of you. Right now, we're just your IT department, okay? You guys are on the front lines. You guys are the heroes. We're the backup. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll definitely rely on you.
So this is great, and we are back in time. We're only 4 minutes behind, but I think we're doing fine. The next speaker is also another distinguished speaker, Prof. Chang Tian Lu. who is a professor and National Capital Region Program Director in the Department of Computer Science. He's also the curriculum lead in the Innovation Campus and Associate Director of Sangani Center for Artificial Intelligence and Data Analytics at Virginia Tech. Professor Liu has more than 200 publications on top-rated journals, and his research has been supported by several national organizations, including NSF, NIH, DOD, DOE, and IARPA and DOT. So thank you, CT, for joining us. We're looking forward to your presentation, and if you like, you can share slides as well. I'll allow sharing.
Yes, thanks, Professor Abbas. I need to share the screen. Can you enable me to share my screen?
Yes, it is enabled now.
So first, I want to thank the Professor Abbas invitation. So it's my great honor to present our work on using the spatial temporal event prediction using the social media to identify and to detect some event earlier in advance of time. So this is an example of the motivation, what we started, and then we start the project in the 2014 or 15, and then this is the motivation. So for example, that when there was an event started, the people using the social media public data set, they've been raising the issues. So for example, here the people protest against the injustice. And then there are some protests start from the July 4th, but actually the event happened on the July the 25th. So we want to see that can we use some early warning to identify or predict the event. So for example, that on July 7th, they say that today at the 7 p.m., then they can see they want to have the starting the event. Okay, so that's we want to use this open source data set as the precursor of the event detection. And another is we can also use for the outbreak detection. So for example, if you use the CDC data set, they compile every day and then put it in compile to every state and then to the whole country. So sometimes they stay a little bit 1 week or the 1 month delay. But if you use the data set on the social media, you can quickly daily the response. For example, you can see that when people put a sign on the social media, you can quickly identify the event, a location, and the time. So it's really space and time that the identification of the outbreak or the social event. So the project is the IAPA project. We want to use the open source data set, so the public available data set. Then we want to anticipate or detect. Then we will say the population level event. So for example, the political crisis, the humanitarian crisis, mass violence, riots, and then the outbreak. So that's the purpose of the project. So for example, there was an event in the 2014 in Venezuela. So that's the event. You can see that was the actual event location, and then you also have the predicted. So we can predict the event. We want to do the prediction far ahead of the time. So that the issue is the spatial temporal. So you need to predict the event correctly, right? And you also need to identify the event the early ahead of time, so that the spatial and the temporal. So, and then you can see that most of the event we actually identify the event, the locations. Then I want to show the model how we identify the event. So that's the example. The event will be for 13 South American countries: the Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, El Salvador, and Venezuela. So the language is another issue. So we have the Spanish, Portuguese, English, and German, for example, and also some native languages that have been used. So and the different event type. So we have the civil unrest, the vote, and then the infectious human illness called the ILI. So we have each event. We also identify as violent or non-violent, and then each category. So we only identify. We need to label it, classify it, each category of the event. So we including the mass violence, protests, riots, and then the outbreak. So why we need to forecast the event? There are many purposes. So I believe many of you should be aware of it already. So we have the social scientists collect the citizen action, travelers, you need to issue the advisory of our government, and then the government, you need to advance warnings to minimize the loss and the life of the infrastructure. And industry, you need to have reduce the loss of the supply chain, and then to secure the operational stabilities. So let's take how we evaluate the event forecast. So we want to do the forecast event automatically with generate the event without a human in the loop, and then the event can be evaluated. So we have the method to perform the evaluation. So they use the gold standard report or GSR, and then they evaluate using the newspaper outlet to evaluate the correctness of the event. So in terms of the metrics, we have the qualities, lead time, recall precision, and the probability. So I will discuss in all this slide. So for example, we issue an alert. So there's the alert ID. ID is used for the later we do the tracking, and then which population, and then we perform the classification. So which type, and then the event forecast date, which date will the event occur, and then the locations, and then probabilities. And then we identify the lead time. So for example, this was a day of forecast, and we predict the event will happen on T3, and then the T4 was the reported date, and then the T2 was the event date. So we want to guarantee that our predict date should be within the 2 weeks window of the event date. So that's the quality of the event. So for example, and then that's the date quality, and then the total from our forecast date to the reported date is called the lead time. So for example, in this case, we have predict the event far ahead of the reported time, the 6 days before. So the lead time will be 6. And then there are also some other measurement. For example, that's the data quality. So within the window of the 7 days before and after. So the 7-day data quality, and then which population, and then the event type, and then the location in terms of the country, state, and the cities. And then also have so total score, 4 score will be if everything correct, you'll get 4, and then you want to achieve the 3 above 3.5. And then the data delivery. So we want to say what ahead of the delivery time. So for example, in this case, we had the 6 days the lead time. So this is the evaluation target. So we want to see that the first year, second year, and the third year. So you can see that finally we have the final year. We can predict the 10 days before it's reported on the newspaper. And then the quality score, we achieved the 3.4. So precision, it means that out of the 100 event, we can predict our prediction was the 87. And then recall is mean that if there were the 100 event, then we can identify 78 events. So there is a trade-off between the precision and recall, and we need to balance both the precision and recall. So for example, in this case, in the final year, we need to achieve the 0.8 of the precision recall, but we achieve the higher precision, and then the recall close to the 80%. So there are some highlighted case studies. So for example, this case is Venezuela in the spring 2013. So that's the Venegas movement. So the reason was because the increased in the bus fares and then the health and the education cost, and the student used the vinegars to have the salt in the cloth for demonstration to protest from the police the tear gas. So the most of the you can see that our prediction most of the we can identify the cities, Sao Paulo and the Rio de Janeiro we identify, but then for the rural area we could not identify. So that's an issue later we will try to address it. So GSI is the ground truth, and then our prediction was the embers. So then the size proportional to the event of the alerts. And in terms of the timeline, you can see that there's the starting from the bus fare, and then that's the actual the blue is the actual event, and then our prediction. You can see that our prediction a little bit 1 or 2 day lag. After the event, then we perform the prediction. But then, so that's for the Brazil. Oh, sorry. So the previous this is Brazil. Okay, Brazilian, and then the for example, the next case is the Venezuela. So Venezuela, we have for the 2014. So you can see in this case, our model also can identify the countries, the cities. So for example, we have identified the San Cristobal or even the rural area we identified. So that's the reason is the police brutalities. So starting from the city of the San Cristobal. So you can see that in terms of timeline, we can we can quickly identify the call for protest starting from in this state. You can see that right now we quickly identify the event starting location and then the date. And then we also have when the protest spread nationwide, we can identify. So that in terms of timeline, we roughly close to the event date. So that's our prediction. This is actual event, and then the green is the prediction. So you can see the trend. We almost follow the trend in terms of the capture the early warning, and then also have the identify the locations. So that we use all the big data set open sources. So what our the data source we use the Twitter data set, and we also use the blogs, and then Facebook, and then we also have the economic indicators, and then also temperature, and then parking lot imagery from satellite image, and also the Google search. That we also use all the available data sources. So there are 6 V we consider in our predictions. So we consider the volume, velocity, variety, veracity, value, and the visualization. All the 6 aspects we consider in our prediction. So the first one is we use all the available data sources, and then we perform the data enrichment, the geocoding, for example, right? We do that, and we extract the time and the location, and then we filter. For example, we use this is for the disease. We filter related to the flu-related content, and then we perform the time series, the surrogate extraction, and we perform the predictions. For example, we use all the different models. We perform the prediction. We generate the 60 warnings per week for 15 countries, but then we need to perform the pruning for the prediction. So finally, we generate the 50 warnings per week for total of the 15 countries. So we do the refinement for the model result. And then the velocity, we need to identify that because the big data set, we need to make sure that we can quickly process all the data set. So the processing speed of the server should be fast enough. So for example, this for the real-time monitoring. So once they have higher than the server can handle, you can see that we just cannot process it. So that's just empty because the server overloaded of the servers. So variety. In addition to the open source data set, we also use the satellite images. So for example, when there was the DD outbreak, you can see that all the parking lot will be totally fully occupied, and also the parking lot around the hospital will also be occupied. So we also including the parking lot data set to have the enhanced our prediction the precisions. And then another significant issue is the rumor, so veracity, the correctness of the data set. So for example, in this for the Ebola related rumors in the 2014. So for example, in the beginning, right, the zombies related rumor dominated the Twitter space. You can see that the zombie related rumors, and then later starting from the October the 6th, you have the terrorist related rumors started. So in addition to the detection, we also need to remove the rumors before we perform our the prediction. So that also another group working on the rumor detection and the removal. Another issue is the location. For example, I'm the Dallas airport to present Embers ICDM on the location, on which date, and then hashtag data mining. So from this the tweet, you need to identify this document. You need to identify reported locations, and then also locations, and then mention places, and then also event locations. So what you need to extract is the event locations. So then we identify the events. So that there are multiple indicators to identify to geolocate the tweet and from the news articles. And then we also perform all the event. You need to perform the visualization. So for example, we have the geographic map and all the tweet related to this event. And then when the user click the specific specific event, then it will show the location, and then also have the corresponding the tweet, and then also have the influential user can also be identified, and then also the frequency of each keywords. And then later on, when the analysts, they can use the audio trail to perform the analysis on the post-event analysis. So we have the spatial and then temporal event and the storytelling analysis. So there are different kinds of the predictive models. So we have all the data sources, and then we can use the plain port test. You can identify from influential user. If you can identify from the influential user, you can identify that there was a plain event. Then you can almost finish the identifier, right? And you can see how the event was discussed on the social media. So we could call the cascade the regression model. And then we also have called the dynamic query expansion. This was developed by our group. So I will discuss this dynamic query expansion in the following slide. And then you can base on volume to identify, so-called the lasso model. And then you can also use historic event to perform the training, called the baseline training. So based on ground truth to do the baseline models. So under what we identified for the model, we perform called the dynamic query expansion. So the issue is how to identify the event related to tweet from the social media is critical. So for example, in this case, that when the people discuss the hack, but only one we want to identify is just the computer hack. So that's is important to filter all the tweet to what is most relevant to the event you want to identify. So how to identify relevant microblog tweet is critical, it's challenging, because all this the short-term formal language is regularly used in formal language and the low vocabulary reuse, and sometimes out of vocabulary words. And then this microblog are the dynamic in feature. So that, for example, the hashtag is dynamic removing, and then even the topic, and then the emergent theme will be changed. So we have to use we need to use the dynamic expansion, query expansion. So traditional method, they use the keyword based on keywords, and then train a classifier, and they use rule based or decision tree. But the issue is for the event, because our event identified is the informal and the ungrammatical, and the volume is high, and then it's dynamic. and the new topics and new hashtag is the emerging every day, and then it's noisy, and then it's unbalanced. So for example, you have less than 5% related to civil unrest, and then out of this 5%, less than 5% with geocode. And then we also have another issue that can we utilize the social network structure to improve the prediction accuracies. So this is what we propose. We call it the unsupervised and adaptive, called the dynamic query expansion. So for example, in the beginning, we want to identify that this was an event we want to identify. So for example, the movement and hashtag march against the imposition of the candidate in election. The issue that before the event started, we didn't know that what will be the keyword, what will be these terms. So we want to do can we identify this key term in advance of time, right? So what we have, we use some generic terms from the domain knowledge from the political science professor. So for example, they gave us all these key query called the protest, demonstration, the unrest, march. So for example, we use this C query from the C query. And when we run it through the social media space from the Twitter or the Twitter keyword, if they identify all these key terms, then we retrieve it. And then we go to the search space, we identify the high frequency key term from this space. So this become the second iteration, the key terms. So out of all these key terms, this is the high frequency term from the first iteration. And then we can see that this is the after first iteration, or this is originally the key term, right? This was originally key term. And then the second iteration based on frequency, then we identify this is the second iteration, the high frequency keywords. And then use these high frequency keywords, then we go to the search space again from the Twitter space. And this high frequency, the key term again, we identify, right? So for example, this high frequency key term from the second iterations. So you can see the key term have been evolved, have been changed. And then we identify this is the word cloud of the second iteration. You can see that even after the second iteration, we can identify the event location, key players, event time, and then protest organization, hyperlink, and then event description. Right? This is the second iteration, and you can see that we continue the perform the iteration, and then iteratively, then there's the keyword of the third iteration, and finally it converge. So once you can see that once it converge, you can see that the converge keyword almost match the key term for the event after the event happened. So we identify this the event, we identify all these key terms ahead of the time. So that's the advantage of the dynamic query expansion. So we will compare with our keyword identify with the ground truth, the GSR description. You can see the almost match. That's the event, the key term description. And then this was our detected date, and then the event date. You can see that we can quickly identify the event, the key terms ahead of time, or almost close to the event date. So we identify the event keywords. Then our next question is, can we identify the location of the event? And then then we need to predict it because we want to identify the location of the event. So for example, based on the key term we identify, we go to the Twitter space. We identify the key term from and then we connect all the keyword together. So the Twitter network. And then we perform the geocoding. The geocoding of all the tweet, we put it together so that the Twitter network clustering, and then with the network clustering put together, and then we put on the map. And then we perform the clustering. So when we perform the clustering, we need to consider the network connectivity and then spatial connectivities. Then we perform the clustering, and then this was all the clustering identified. And then you can see that almost identify the clustering location, but there was still some errors. For example, there was an event, but there's no warning, so they call the false negative. And then we also, for example, there's no event, but identify the event. So we got the false positive. But the most other event can be identified from using the methods. So have the quickly go over. So we identify we use the C query to identify the key terms using the query expansion. And then we use all the network connectivity combined with the geolocation of the tweet, and we perform clustering. After we do the clustering, we can identify event. So that's what we perform for the dynamic query expansion for the event detection. So then I will follow with how can we use this as a big data system. So because once we have the model, we put it together as the systems. So we use the architectures. So we use the open source data set with all the data set put together. We use the ingest data set. Then we perform the tokenization. We identify the entity. We put the data normalization. We perform the geocoding, and then we use a different prediction model. After we do prediction model, we do the fusion and the refinement. We fuse a select the prediction, and we deliver the warning to MITRE to perform evaluation. And then at the same time, we also perform the audit trail index, so they can have analyze each event, the generation from using the audit trail. So on average, we issue the 40 warnings per day out of the 20 terabytes of the archive data set. And then we also store above the 3 billion messages in the systems. And you can see that the 15 gigabyte of the data ingest per day from the open source data. And we also have the system was run autonomously. So you use the cloud servers. We have the different dynamic ingest model, and we perform the enrichment model. And we use the evaluation model, and then we also have the perform monitoring and the archiving. So all the big data, the lesson we learned from the project. For example, we need to invest in visualization. So you see that we have the system perform, we have the show on the map, and then we also have the each event, and then we have the location and time, and each event we perform the filtering so that the visualization system. And then we have once we have the event, we do perform the audit trails. So for example, you have the audit trail for 3 clusters. This is 3 clusters. And once you select the alert, and then you perform the word cloud, and then you can identify top keywords for all the 3 clusters, and then you show each event on the locations, and then identify which the tweet belong to which clusters, and then we can identify the relevant tweet, and you can also identify the influential users of all the events. And we also perform the data reduction. First one, we do from the Twitter message. We do the spatial clustering. We do they put it together, right? And then on each day or each week, we do the temporal training because of the signal number of the tweet. And then after we do the spatial temporal processing, then we issue the warning. So we want to reduce the spatial and the temporal the complexity of the output. Not all the data are the necessary. So for example, we have we use a block data set, we use a news data set, we use the inflation, IQ data set, Twitter data set, and the TR data set. And we evaluate our models. We can see that once we remove some data set, the performance even increase. So it's called the operation test. So the issue is that do we need to use all data set, or if we remove some data set, sometimes the performance even better. So we call it the operation test. So that's, for example, the loss of regression. In the end, we finally use the news data set and the Twitter data set. Then we have the better result. So operation testing. And then we also using some the fusion model. So for example, we have the 5 models. After the 5 model, if you fuse the result together, right? For example, use the kernel density with the fusion model, and then you can see that the fusion, after fusions, the performance even better. So for example, the model after future model can be increased to improve to the above the 3.5. So that's the future model that improve the model, the accuracy combined with the ensemble approach from the multiple models. So our current the model, we want to have the auto narrative, the generations. Actually, this can also be the improve with the recent advance in the NLP. For example, we can also use leverage the advance in the ChatGPT. Then we can generate the informative and then the individual collection of the alerts, and then we perform the storytelling or perform the narrative, and then give additional knowledge. So, for example, this is an example of the narrative. So we found our DQE, we identify the name entities, and we also historic and the real-time statistic, we can put it together, right? And then we found that the query expansion, we can also infer the reason for the protest. And then we also have the descriptive, the protest related key terms together, right? So we can put a narrative together, right? For example, our algorithm forecast, there will be a violent protest on which date, in which locations, right? And then predict that the protest will involve people working in which populations, and then related, then there will be a trigger event. So this content about the economic policies. And then you can see that the major players, influential users, based on our key term, based on the identify, we can also identify influential user. For example, including the Venezuela, the opposition leaders, right, student, president, and then also specific people. And we also have how the event will trigger from other events. So against the rising inflation and the crime, right? Also have the political change. So there's a reason. And then we also the characteristic of the protest. So there are also some relation between the multiple events. So we can generate this narrative to describe the final event, the occurrence. So using the data set, we put it all together. So that's the Embassy team. So most of our PhD students have graduated, and then the Professor Neil Kursian was the PI, and I was a co-PI, and then also some other the PhD student. Most of the PhD students have graduated from the team, and then joined the academia, the institution. Okay, so there are some other publication. We have the dynamic query expansion. We have the DQ algorithm, and then also some rumors on Twitter. So this is also rumor papers. And we also using the dynamic query expansion with the simulation model for the DD outbreak, and then with the real-time data set with Lasso model. And we also have the system paper called the beating the news with Embers. And then we also have the Ember at the 4th year. So and recently we also using the Ember data set with the COVID-19 prediction with the DD outbreak data set. So I think I will stop here. And then that's the system using in a sense, just using the open source data set to do the event, the prediction and analysis.
Thank you very much, Professor Liu. That was very insightful and great. I'll open the door for questions, and as people are raising their hands, I'll ask a quick question. I was going to ask about rumors, and then I was very happy to see that you actually addressed it. But one of the things that we suffer from in the current situation that is happening in Sudan is that there are a lot of rumors that are spread in social media. And sometimes we don't know the truth from the rumor. And at the same time, I wonder if we could identify not just whether a certain piece of news is a rumor or not, but can we allocate some sort of credibility to the agents who are spreading those rumors, so that we can maybe identify or classify certain people that, these accounts, never believe them, they are just rumors, versus these accounts are usually bringing in the truth and whether there are some accounts that are somehow associated, and therefore we can predict that they belong to a certain party, for example. Any comments on that, or any thoughts about it?
Yeah, for the rumor detection, we have been using for a period of time. So rumor, what we use right now, you use almost similar to the PageRank idea. So if, for example, all the rumors, sometimes the people that connected to the untrustworthy people. So if the people connect to the most trusted people, then the people, the rank will be higher, right? So the one issue is the identify the trustworthy of the spreaders. And then the rumor, the spread, the pattern is different. It's different compared with the trustworthy messages. So we can also, one is from the source, one is the spreading the pattern. Another issue is do the geocoding. So we can identify, if we can use the geocoding, then we can geocoding of the neighbors. We can try to pinpoint the location of the source of the rumors.
Yeah, thank you. That's really great. That gives me hope.
Yeah.
Bakri, please go ahead.
I think the muted.
Yeah. Thank you very much for a great presentation. I have two questions. First is how do you deal with the languages? I see you have mentioned that, but there are so many, even within one country, there are just so many different dialects and different languages. So that's one issue. And then the other question is, where do you publish these findings on continuous basis, and are they available to the public?
Oh, okay. So first question is the language issue. When we ask the very good question, that I think when we started this one, the seed query, actually the good thing of the dynamic query expansion is because we just using the one seed query for each languages. So for example, that's for Spanish, and then for the Portuguese we use another seed query, and then we also using in the end we also using for the MENA countries. Actually, we also use MENA country, but then the language, even the language different, but the seed query the same. We use the seed query. Seed query, each language they use the 4-5 the seed query, and then the benefit of the advantage of our model is it doesn't matter which language you use. Once based on the numerical model, we can identify the key terms from the multiple languages. And then also we have, for example, for Brazil, you have the Spanish and then English and then Portuguese. Then we can do the multitask training to see how the language interact with each other. So that's a question is when we consider this dynamic query expansion, it's not specific for one language. It's just we can train for each language as long as you can identify the seed query. And the seed query mostly from the political scientist then gave us the seed query. And once you have a seed query, we can generate a dynamic key term on each event separately. Okay. So there's one for the seed query, and then what I forgot what was the next question?
Is the data available to the public?
Oh, okay. The data. Okay. The question. The question is the system right now have been, once we finish the project, the system is used by the State Department. So the state once I think we transfer the system once it mature, we didn't further the continue research, but the system is still operating. The State Department is using the system. And then the data set is public available. All the data set are public available. We purchased the data set from the Twitter company. Right now, I believe the system still functioning, but in terms of Virginia Tech, we are not involved with the operation of the system. It's just turn over to the ASAPA and turn over to the State Department.
So, well, what I mean by data is like your findings. So for the warnings, for example, do these go to the news agencies?
No.
Or is
no.
there a website?
Also, just what I learned is used only by the government, by the State Department.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
it's not public. The system is not the public. The system is just because it was sponsored by ASAPA.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Thank you. Thank you, CT. This is great. So this will conclude the first part of today's conference. We're going to have a 10 minutes break. And then when we come back, we're going to shift gear a little bit from presentations. We're going to talk about the Declaration of Principles and the way forward from Dr. Nuruddin Sati and Dr. Suleiman Baldo. And then we're going to get into a brainstorming session. And we're going to use some tools actually to be able to brainstorm in real time and have all the ASAPA members who are online to contribute actively so that we can come up with a plan for the near future and hopefully we can make a difference. So I look forward to seeing you all after the break. We're gonna get back here actually in 10 minutes, let's say. So it's gonna be 1:26. And thank you, CT, again. Thank you, all the presenters.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Monty. And let me know if you have any other question. Okay, I can.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Good, Muntasir, you paid attention to that. I stopped the recording.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and I just resumed. Let me add Dr. Baldo as a co-host. So so welcome back. 127. Unfortunately, Dr. Sati had a death in the family, so we are joined by Dr. Suleiman Baldo, and Dr. Sati is not here, correct?
He's not here. He called me to express his apologies. He can't join because where he is, he wanted to just introduce the topic for 5 minutes, but even that he couldn't do.
Oh, he's just calling actually. So yeah. I'll just pause for a minute. That was Dr. Nuruddin Sati, and he repeats his apology for not being able to connect to us. It's actually very admirable that he is still communicating during this difficult time, and we very much appreciate it. We have Dr. Suleiman Baldo with us, and Dr. Baldo is the founding director of the Sudan Transparency and Policy Tracker, a think tank dedicated to exposing and disrupting grand corruption in Sudan. He previously served as a senior policy advisor for the Sentry and the Enough project, and he directed Sudan Democracy First Group, an organization aiming to help bring about faster democratization and peace to war-torn country. He served in many different roles, including being senior analyst at Human Rights Watch in the Horn of Africa, and the director for Africa at the International Crisis Group, and the list goes on and on. We truly admire and respect your effort, Dr. Baldo, and we are very happy that you are here with us. So the floor is yours. Please take it over from here.
Thank you. I follow the efforts and the contributions of ASAPA and really have great admiration and recognition of these efforts. The Declaration of Principles, the quick overview, the idea came sometime, a few weeks into the war in early May, that, upon observing the multiplication of initiative of a political nature by Sudanese civil society actors to find a way to end the war and restore Sudan's democracy. That all these groups that are setting themselves up in exiled countries right across the world, in Australia, in North America, in Europe, in the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, but also inside Sudan, and primarily inside Sudan also, because many initiatives were organized there for the same purpose. These initiatives occurred and happened around the same time by initiators who necessarily didn't know about each other efforts because of the isolation, the disruption of communication, and because they were all facing the same challenge. How do you respond to this disastrous situation? And therefore, you could find that there is a sort of repetition in the general aim they are trying to achieve and the methodology whereby they propose to achieve these objectives and broad aims. At the same time, we are seeing, we saw from day one in the war and today, the civilians have actually taken on the functions of the state in responding to the humanitarian disaster unleashed by the belligerents, the Sudan Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces on the civilian population. That is a response for humanitarian nature that was dictated by the severity of the crisis, and it was the only one present on the ground, with groups that have set themselves up in many instances operating in isolation from any external support, in some instances with their traditional backers in the international community giving some support where that was possible. I have in mind the response to the humanitarian disaster and the medical emergencies unleashed by the war that was organized by the emergency rooms response by the neighborhood committees, the resistance committees, by the doctors' union, the engineers and technicians who tried multiple times, and until now they are still trying. We see that in the news to restart, jumpstart the water, municipal water stations of power generation facilities that were destroyed by the war. So that response was dictated by necessity. It is ongoing. It is also in the volunteering goodwill of many Sudanese in Gaddarif, in Kassala, in Madani, in across the country, who have set up reception centers for the hundreds of thousands of civilians who had to flee the fighting in Khartoum and elsewhere in Sudan, just as happening now, the massive displacement occurring in Darfur and in South and West Kordofan and so on. So civilians are the vital forces of the country, and they are still, until today, not taken into consideration when people are considering, by people, regional, international agencies and mediators and facilitators of peace talks and so on. They're not taking this role of civilians seriously enough by the magnitude of their contributions and so on. Coming to the civilian initiatives of a political nature, which are seeking, an end to the conflict at the negotiation table, and this is political in the broader sense of the word. Declaration of Principles Coalition is just one initiative among many, and I don't want to, belittle or ignore that there have been a lot of effort by many across, Sudan and globally among Sudanese in the diaspora to contribute ideas and thoughts and organization, including membership in ASAPA and other associations in North America. So what we try to do is to find the common objectives and principles that are expressed in the foundational documents of these initiatives and put them in one platform, a document that says the Sudanese civic actors as a collective want to achieve these broad objectives based on these principles and using these means. These are the main articulations of Declaration of Principles of the document. And from the moment we put this forward to a large number of groups, by no means all, but I would say a significant number of different groups, the idea picked momentum, ending with the adoption of what now is known as the Declaration of Principles by these associations. It's of course a sort of consensual agreement among these groups that they will act together to achieve these broad principles and objectives for ending the war and restoring democracy in Sudan. Since then, the Declaration of Principles is gradually organizing itself towards becoming more of a structured body. We now have all the members, all the associations and individuals who signed today or signed in the electronic universe of today, that is today, gave their consent during a general large or expanded meeting, that they agree with the document and support and endorse it. So they are signatories and they represent a sort of a general assembly for the Declaration of Principle as a coalition. And at the same time, because of the demands of the daily work on the initial people who put themselves forward to this, and this include Ambassador Sati, Dr. Bakri Jack, Al-Baghr Al-Afif, myself, other people who are familiar to you, Abdurrahman Al-Lamin, and the reporter, and Al-Ustaz Abdussalam Sid Ahmed. So these are the 6 initial who began these exercises. Now, from the General Assembly, we have a larger group of like 15 members who are the steering committee and who run the daily work of the this coalition, if you wish, information. The main articulation, the main axis of activities of the steering committee and of the coalition, which is under formation of the Declaration of Principles, are, of course, outreach to other initiatives that are not members or signatories of the Declaration of Principles. We organize online discussion and emailing, WhatsApp exchanges with the main better and best established groups, so that they become part of the part of this general coming together around one platform. I will give you a few examples. For example, this coming Monday, there is a forum that we organize, which is hosted by the Sudan Working Group, of about, I would say a couple of hundred organizations that are focused on Sudan or directly involved operationally in Sudan, from all the span of civil involvement, that's to say humanitarian intervention, capacity building in democratization, capacity building in rural development, and so on. So all these organizations have a joint working group where they periodically meet to exchange information and coordinate operationally among the different groups. We are presenting some of the leading, I wouldn't say all the leading, but some of the leading initiatives to this community, so that they understand that the Sudanese are working and talking to each other as civilians, and that they have common goals and objectives, and agree on a real solid set of principles. And the groups who are taking part in this indirect exchanges between Declaration of Principle as a body and the others are the national mechanism, the Aliyah Wataniya, for restoring, for supporting democracy and ending the war, the Confederation of Civil Society Organizations, Confederaliyat al-Mujtama' al-Madani, and the organization of Mansam. They are working together for unifying initiatives. Sudaniyun Muhtamun, this is another group which is very active that came up with a roadmap on how to resolve this crisis in Sudan. And then there is this Sudan platform for democracy development platform, SPDP, Sudan Peace Development and Democracy Platform, which is also taking part, of course, in addition to the Declaration of Principle group. We will each present our general objectives and explain the efforts we are trying to engage in to bring our different groups, these major initiatives together. A step in that direction is a sort of a joint understanding of what the moment dictates that we have reached together with the national mechanism for supporting democratic transition and ending the war, Al-Aliyya Al-Wataniya. And this will be made public, in the coming few days. Why is this happening now? This urge to agree on joint positions and so on. This is because the moment dictates it. Particularly since a couple of days yesterday, or even since yesterday, with the exit of Burhan from the general headquarters of the army, and his regional tour, leading him to, Adbara, Port Sudan, and now back to Adbara, and also travel internationally to Gulf countries, Egypt, and so on, at the head of the Sovereignty Council and the General Commander of Sudan Armed Forces. Which means that, if there are any political, decisions taken by this, the head of the Sudanese Armed Forces and the so-called Sovereignty Council, although it was dissolved de facto by the coup d'etat of October 21, the civilians will not be at the table. Civilians, that's to say, civilians who are committed to democratic change and who are committed to principles such as, human rights and accountability for mass violations of these rights, and the role of civilians in leading the transformation of the country towards democracy and modernization. On the contrary, we are concerned that there will be civilians who are part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So that gives more urge for the need for civilians to agree on these common principles and act together. We really need to be acting on these principles and getting them to to basically be part of any solutions to the current crisis. So the common broad objectives, and I will end here, so I'll not to take more time. I know this is a short session of all the different initiatives, including those of the Declaration of Principle, is to put an end to the war, facilitate as a matter of priority humanitarian assistance to the victims of the war. And there are millions, half of the Sudanese are now food insecure, critically and acutely food insecure. Therefore, half of the population of Sudan today who remain in Sudan are at the risk of famine. That is by UN recognition and general statement. The promotion of civilian participation in all peace efforts and all peace negotiations. Restoration of civilian-led democratic transition. The barring of military and security agencies and armed actors from participating in government in the post-conflict political dispensation. And then the restoration of the financial sovereignty of the government by bringing all state-owned enterprises under the oversight and control of the Ministry of Finance and regulatory agencies of the government of Sudan, such as the General Auditor of Sudan and the Chamber of Audit in Sudan and other agencies. So these general objectives, we believe in them, and based on them, we are going to seek broadening the base of this broader consensus. Now, I will stop here, and if there are other questions, or if there are questions and any additional comments, I will be glad to engage on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beldo. I'll open the door for questions or a window, either way. Okay, Khalaf Allah, please. Go ahead, Khalaf Allah. All right. Oh, let's see. Khalaf Allah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very nice and concise presentation of what's happening. There is a suggestion that the current emergency rooms, as they call it, غرف الطوارئ, to be the basis for future rebuilding and continuing of the rescue operations. They can, of course, they are on the ground. They can provide more accurate information and statistics. They are also trustworthy. They have been doing this work out of very good motives, and they have been very effective. So people trust them to handle all the the stuff that will be coming to from outside, the grants and so on. Is there any movement or any direction to establish the emergency rooms as the actual basic management units for future activities?
Yes, thank you. I'll take another or a couple of 2 comments or questions, and then I respond to that. Yeah. Now, I mean, waiting for other questions to come forward.
Go ahead, Bakri. Bakri, and then Suad, and then we have Isam. I also allow the talk.
Okay, I think Dr. Saad was before me. So go ahead, Saad.
Thank you very much indeed. How can I activate the video? I don't have a knob for a video here.
Oh.
I have to make you a co-host to do that.
Can you do that? Because I want to be on video as I speak, please. Thank you.
Okay. I'll promote you to panelist, and then when you accept that, I'll make you a co-host after that.
Okay.
Maybe I can ask my.
I don't find her.
Can I ask my question?
Yeah, go ahead. As I do this. Yes, please.
So thank you, Salman Beldo. My question is there any contact from the from the people of the initiative and all these groups together to be able to attend the talks in Jeddah or wherever? Like how can we as a big coalition of organizations be represented in these talks? What are the mechanisms that the group is taking to be a part of these talks, these discussions about peace and and going forward from here.
Great, thank you. This is a great question, Bakri. I will respond once we hear from the other colleagues. Dr. Suad.
You're muted. Suad, you're muted.
All right, thank you very much indeed. I can go ahead. Usually, Dr. Sulaiman Bardo, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Dr. Muntasir, Dr. Bakri, Dr. Yasmin, and all of the ASAPA Executive Committee for this opportunity. Dr. Baldo, with regard to, now I'm of course a member of the Declaration of Principle through UCANA, as well as through the Sudanese American Women Forum in Virginia, Washington, DC. I've always been concerned about the fact that civilians, and you spoke very eloquently and extensively about that, civilians are not represented in any negotiations. Those, I mean, Saudi Arabia and the United States, when they negotiate with these two criminals, whether Dam al-Sharia or whether the army, there are no civilians involved in there. You also eloquently spoke about the fact that Al-Burhan is no longer sovereign of the whatever council that was dissolved after the military coup of October 25th of 2021. Nonetheless, everybody is calling him still Rais Majlis al-Siyada and stuff like that. So this is very concerning indeed. Why isn't, I mean, we have so many civilian initiatives, including the Declaration of Principles with Dr. Sati and you and others, and all of us involved, the 15th that you mentioned. There are many other, of course, there was the Arkaweet, initiative. There were so many, 25 or more. None of them or collectively are able to tell the United States of America and Saudi Arabia or those Usata or those that have been engaged in this, that it is imperative that civilians should be represented in all of these negotiations. What is stopping that, Dr. Baldo? And I really hope to hear, clearly about that, because this is very concerning. It is very concerning. So are they reconciling them so that they come back as Hemeti and Burhan and those dictators who have been controlling this country for the past 34 years? So I really hope to hear from you, Dr. Baldo, about that. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Dr. Saad, and I'll respond definitely. If there is another question, otherwise I can launch.
If I may, Dr. Sulaiman, thank you very much. My name is Assam Saleh Osman. I'm a surgeon. And thank you very much for this webinar. This is not my area of expertise, but I've enjoyed very much the first session, and I'm enjoying this very much. The principles you declare are in many ways universal, and as such, they don't belong to any specific person, yet they belong to all Sudanese who are patriotic and wishing the country well. The principles you've outlined, as I see them, take us back to a situation just prior to the war. Are you aware that the members of the resistance committees declared in October 2022 something called the Declaration of Principles of the December Revolution? الشباب اللي موجودين اللي بيتكلم عنهم أخونا خلف الله with emergency committees now in Sudan, 19 principles, many of whom are the same as yours, but others that speak to trying to solve the chronic problem of Sudanese politics as they see it. And if you are not aware of it, I've emailed a copy to our host today. I would suggest you read it. And I would reach out to these young men and women who are currently on the ground in the Sudan, facing great danger, yet doing their best to keep the country and our families safe. I think that if you are to go forward and maybe include them in this project, which has my full support in that we all want one common voice, you are more likely to succeed. And I hope that I can raise awareness of this original declaration of principles of Thawra December al-Majida, as they call it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hissam. Okay, I think this is a good number before I start losing track of who said what. With regard to what you mentioned, I will start from the last, going backward, Dr. Hissam, with regard to the principles that were identified by resistance groups. Of course, we would not seek to build a broad alliance, a grand alliance of civil actors without, really making sure that the resistance committees are on board. And I can assure you that we have been reaching out to these groups, not only in the tripartite capital, but across Sudan, from regions in Eastern Sudan, in particular, Darfur and Nuba Mountains, so that they are part of the discussion and they are very eager to engage despite the difficulties of communication. This is the general problem, of course, for people trying to, have conversations online with our countrymen and women because of the war, and the impact it had on telecommunication systems across the country. Plus, of course, the disruption of power supply and so on. But we are aware of the principles that have guided the general charters, of the resistance committees, and we are talking to them so that they feel that they can, be part of a broader coalition. We are very much aware also that there have been, a large rift between, root, basically community-based associations and groups at the local level, such as the resistance committees by definition. They define themselves geographically by location, and the political class as a collective. Therefore, relation of the young generation losing trust in the elder political leadership and really looking at them as not trustworthy or worthy of their, of their trust, and worthy of, and they don't see them as capable of, shaping the future. And one effort where we try to invest is to try and bridge that gap. By all means, because of the diversity and the breadth of the movement of the resistance committees, we will always recommend and accept, basically we would always appreciate and accept offers of facilitating communications between the declaration of principle group and resistance committees who may not have been in our outreach activities so far. So, Dr. Hissam, please feel free to make such connections. I will relate to the colleagues our information for communication with regard to emails and WhatsApp numbers and so on. Bakri was asking about the talks in Jeddah and whether this mechanism have representation from civic actors. There are three main initiatives that have emerged and asserted themselves. Jeddah is concerned about, achieving a ceasefire, basically. And this is why they say they are limiting their the involvement of the Sudanese to the belligerents, to the two military actors, the Sudan Armed Forces, the Rapid Support Forces, to get them to agree to to agree to a ceasefire and the deployment of an internationally supported massive humanitarian relief operation. Therefore, it's a humanitarian ceasefire. It's not a final ceasefire. It's not about separation of forces, but it's a monitored ceasefire for the specific purpose of facilitating humanitarian access, which the RSF has agreed to. The government of Sudan insisted that the RSF vacate all civilian residential areas and whatnot, and over the technicality of whether this could be included in a humanitarian ceasefire or not. The talks have not been progressing, a lot. The U.S., that is the key partner with the Saudis in the Jeddah process, are keen on involving the civilians in a second phase. And they would want, like other international actors, to see that civilians are coming together under one platform to represent themselves on what they want. The question has been for many, for many long months is, what do the civilians want? It's not clear to us. Everyone is speaking differently and so on. So Declaration of Principles and these other major initiatives are trying to, and they are asserting what the civilians want, basically, and they are putting it together outside. The other initiative is that of the IGAD/African Union. It's IGAD that has the mandate to convene civilian talks as part of the peace process, but the IGAD doesn't have the means to do it or the country expertise that the AU has. And it doesn't have, of course, the means, the resources, which the African Union has considerable funding from the European Union for a peace trust fund that allows a lot of flexibility. So the African Union is going to be the lead, but jointly with the IGAD, because the original mandate holder is, of course, the IGAD. IGAD has been blocked from exercising that mandate because Sudanese armed forces has rejected the mechanism they opted for, the quartet, the heads of state of IGAD, to convene the two leaders, the two commanders of the armies in a meeting of peace to end the war. This is the approach that IGAD has opted for, and it was blocked from day one, vetoed by the army's rejection of the president of Kenya as being too close to the Rapid Support Forces. We know the story. So the African Union now has been talking about convening civilians. They said in a big meeting on the 15th of August, that meeting has been postponed to the 8th of September, and now it's going very likely to be pushed back to end of September. Why? Because the African Union appears to be really very keen to be seen as doing something about the crisis in Sudan, and therefore is rushing a process that is very complex and should be done in consultation and with the involvement of Sudanese civic actors, which hasn't been the case. They have reached out to people individually or some groups, but kept their cards to themselves. And what became known of who they have in mind as list of guests, it was very alarming, because they were considering, according to these leaks, to invite representative of the defunct National Congress Party, and of representative of Sudan Armed Forces and of the Rapid Support Forces, which you don't do. This is the people who are responsible for the destruction of the Sudanese and of the country, and for the massive suffering that is inflicted on the entire population. They should really be not in this, at least first consultation, but at a later stage when the civilians have engaged with international agencies that have the mandate to resolve this crisis in a way that is meaningful. And as a result of this rush and of these, ill-advised ideas, the African Union has been under a lot of pressure to act more in a way consequential way and be clear that this is about change. This is not about restoring any legitimacy or a role for the military in the future dispensation of Sudan. Pressure, I should include from ourselves. And that comes to the question about whether we have been reaching out. Dr. Suad, we have been sending letters so far, privately to the African Union, to the IGAD, about what civilians want, which are basically the articulation of the broad principles of the Declaration of Principles. I'll send a copy also for circulation to the Congress or for the circulation of the these conference members subsequently. But we have been in communication with all, in the diplomatic outreach of the Declaration of Principle Group. We sent letters to all these actors, but then in a very near future, we will be speaking publicly with regard to what the international actors, mediators in particular, facilitators of peace talks should do about a fair and necessary genuine representation of civilians in the talk. I think this covers most of the questions that were raised. If I've left out any, please let me know.
I have a follow-up, if I may.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Baldo, very much indeed for your answers. Now, with regard to the fact that the leaders of negotiating, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, about the first part is humanitarian, that they want to stop the war. That's why they're excluding civilians and talking only to these criminals, the generals. This has been, an utter failure. Now the war entered its 5th month since April 15th, and nothing has happened. Nothing has materialized. Every ceasefire has failed, consistently. So until when should this be going? With regard to the IGAD/African Union, now, why are they listening to this illegitimate government that they're saying they don't want the Kenyan president to be present, and that's why they're not participating? I mean, until when are people going to listen to an illegitimate government that came through a military coup since 21? These are very serious questions, Professor Baldo, and I really hope that all of these civilians leaders, including, the Declaration of Principle, when you talk, of course, about the fact that civilians, who are they and who are these organizations, they need to come together. Yes, that's a fact. But can't these organizations, such as your initiative, be the representative that can be, represented in those negotiations? And can they draw the attention that this government is not a government, is not a legitimate government, should not be listened to? Until when are we going to be waiting for those, very disturbing things? Professor Baldo, thank you very much.
Yeah, so this initiative cannot pretend that it can represent, the diversity and breadth of all the organizational structures and actors in civil society, let alone of the broader Sudanese society. But as I said, we do have reached out to political actors as coalitions, such as Forces of Freedom and Change, Central Committee, but also Forces of Freedom and Change, Democratic Bloc, and the Radical Change Coalition. We have been talking to them in our outreach to ensure that when there is political negotiations for ending the conflict, the broader society is represented. We are acting in this case as a conduit and as a catalyst to facilitate and make possible such broad representation with clear criteria. Also, we don't want in that category of civil actors or civic actors, rather, those who have promoted the war or took part in it, or who are not supportive of democratic transition. For instance, groups that supported the coup d'etat of October 2021. So this is from one, side here. You will notice that the international community response at the humanitarian level has been very timid until today, to say the least, compared, for example, with the response to the crisis in Ukraine. And here I would like to address the question by, a previous question about the emergence of the emergency room responses and why aren't they part of the humanitarian response? Of course, a major, obstacle for the deployment of the humanitarian relief organizations between the beginning of the war and until today is the lack of trust in the official structure that has been put in place in Port Sudan to receive international assistance and channel it to those who need it. There are two types of assistance coming in the country in Port Sudan. One that is brought by international relief agencies such as World Food Program, the Food and Agriculture Organization for the agricultural season, World Health Organization, UNICEF, ICRC, and so on. And those large international operators maintain control over the resources they, in kind that they bring to Port Sudan, and make sure that it doesn't go to either of the belligerents, because in every single instance that it went through one of the belligerents, it ended up being abused, diverted, and some, has been seen in the local markets, even in Port Sudan itself. The government structure that is overseeing the flow of international assistance to the victims of the war is controlled by security agents, the military intelligence to be specific, and the Humanitarian Affairs Commission, which is dominated by the general intelligence operatives. And their role so far has been really security-minded, in the sense that, for instance, they are delaying and putting a lot of red tape for the issuing of visas for teams of doctors and of surgeons and medical supplies that should be flowing into Sudan, but they are delaying the visas for weeks and months for no obvious reason. Of course, one clear reason is that they want, perhaps by all these delays, to force these organizations and agencies to hand them these supplies so that they distribute it as they want. But the other, of course, is that they see any and all, even humanitarian and medical organizations such as MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, as these are foreigners, these are going to be there spying, and what do they need to interfere in our, the traditional security mentality. The end result, even with the less relief that is flowing to Sudan, at this time, not much of it is reaching civilians. And we are seeing that people in reception camps in Madani and Gadarif and everywhere where there is no fighting, in Shimali and Nahr al-Nil and so on, Kadugli, before the fighting started there, is done by local volunteers and local goodwill of people, of neighborhoods, collecting what they can and giving it. And then people from these localities, sending money with all the difficulties we know to their relatives who have been displaced and so on. So we do have a real crisis there, and that is why, even at the level of the humanitarian ceasefire, civilians need to be represented. And that's what we have been telling the international mediators. I would like to assure you of that. And this responds also to the questions of the emergence of emergency rooms, because international actors are now supporting the emergency rooms as trusted channels and conduits for getting relief supplies to where they need to go. But of course, there is no much publicity about this for obvious security reasons, but they are among the trusted conduits. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Baldo. This was great information, and thank you for sharing this with us. The next activity we have now is a brainstorming session, and that is open for everyone who is in the meeting today. I've shared a link on the chat, so everyone please click on that and join in. It will ask you to log in basically into this Miro platform. I will share my screen and show you what is expected as we are going through the activity, and why we are doing this. So I'll just share a screen. Let me share the whole screen.
I just wanted to thank Dr. Beldo very much indeed for his response to my question. And it's good to see you after being our keynote speaker at the Sudan Association in 2019 at ASU when I was president of the SSA. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Saad.
Thank you,
You're
Saad. Many thanks.
You're welcome.
So this is when you log in, this is what you're going to see. This is a Miro platform. Is basically would allow everyone to type in their contributions simultaneously. The way that we have divided this is for the ASAPA proposed activities in the near future and maybe over the next year or so. One on the left top here, you see the theme of utilizing tools and methods, and this is building on the presentation that we have seen today. We have another theme here on the right top about scholarship activities, and this is where, as academicians, all of us can contribute. So basically, writing articles, writing papers, and so on that could help Sudan in what is going on now. As was mentioned by Nathaniel earlier today, these kind of information sharing is going to activate interest, but they do not create interest. So we want to push in that direction. On the bottom, you have the education and outreach activities. And these are the things that we can do in education, whether we collaborating with Sudan universities or trying to do something for the students who currently do not have a way to move forward, to complete their degrees, or even to come in here for their graduate education. And then on the right, you have collaborative projects. And these could be things that we are ready to do in collaboration with each others or with other associations. We can also fund some of these activities at a small scale through the grants that we have started this last year. So with all of that, what I expect each one of you, I would like each one to just pick a row, the first row in one of those four corners, and start typing in. So for example, if we go in here, utilizing tools and methods, I can go in here and start typing utilizing open source tools to exclude or to identify rumors in social media, for example. Everyone can just go and type in the things that you think we should be working on as ASAPA members in one of those. We are only filling in the first rows. Once you are done with what you are doing, I'll give you 5 minutes and then I'll ask each one to go to the next round. In the 5 minutes, just spend your time picking one row and writing your thoughts. The second round, you're going to go to the second row in a different group from the one that you started writing in. And you're going to read whatever other people have written in the first row, brainstorm, think about it, and type in the second row your reiteration of the idea or improvement of the idea or another idea that comes to mind based on what you have read. So that's what we want to do now. And I'm going to start the timer. So I'm going to give everyone 5 minutes. Please think, give us that beautiful gray matter products as you're typing in. You don't have to be an ASAPA member to contribute. We welcome all ideas. So please join in if you are online and you want to contribute. We'd love to read your thoughts. If you want to type something and for any reason you cannot, for example, if you are logging in through the phone, you can write it in the chat and let me know where you want me to paste it, and I'll do that. Okay, Shahinaz, please go ahead. Shahinaz, you had your hands up. You can speak. You are mute.
Thank you for this opportunity. Good evening, everybody. Actually, the chat is disabled.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Or maybe not for participants. Okay, I will make everyone a panelist so that you can write in the chat if you need to. Yeah, Hinaz, if it doesn't allow you still, you can just tell me where to type and I'll do that. On your side of the screen, when you're logged in, if you use the wheel on the mouse, you can zoom in or you can zoom out as much as you would like, if that would help you in typing. Now I got 5 minutes done. I'm gonna ask you now, please go to a different row in a different group, read everything that was written on the first row, think about that and start typing on the second row. That will be for another 5 minutes, and then we'll see if we want to do a third round or start summarizing and see if there are certain themes that emerged.
When I click on one of the squares, it just highlights. I can't type.
Can you
Maybe
double click on it, Khalaf, and try that? Let's see.
okay.
It's strange. I see two of you, actually. There is one here and there is one there. You're logged into twice, it seems. Yeah, if you double click, then you can type. Welcome, Tariq. So for those who just joined, what we are doing is we are writing ideas in the second row now for each one of those different clusters. So one cluster we have is collaborative projects. The other one is education and outreach. And this, for some reason, we got somebody expanded one of those sticky notes. We have scholarship activities here, and we have utilizing tools and methods. And we're writing down ideas about activities that ASAPA can contribute to in any of those regards. And I will share the link again on the chat so that those who want to join can join again. Okay, let's read what we have so far. In terms of utilizing tools and methods, what we have is utilizing open source tools to identify rumors in social media. We have used a declaration to talk with US senators and representatives, sponsoring web-based platform for diaspora employment. So these two are utilizing the tools. Then provide, in the second row, the ideas built on that, we have provide resistance committees ability to identify SAF and RSF dangers. That's really interesting. Communicate through the ASAPA website and different social media. That's great. So this is something that we can build on if we have the tools, and we can help the resistance committees. That would be great. We can use our website as a platform. Over here we have the scholarship activities, training of the trainers. That's very nice. Actually, this could be some sort of workshops that we have for our members, so that the new generation can benefit from what the seasoned faculty members know. Developing RC members as future public service leaders for New Sudan. That's great, and that could fit also within some sort of a capacity building activities that we can do. Grant writing collaboration, and encourage collaboration between Sudanese investigators across the globe. Great idea too. So we can have, we can have workshops for grant writing. We can contact even funding agencies to join our workshops and so on. And then we can establish some collaboration and grant writing collaboration. That's great. Provide grant support that builds on that, and then writing articles analyzing the situation in Sudan. And I think we need something like that as the academic association that we have here to fill that role that I think it's missing actually from the arena now. All right, we have education and outreach, participation on online teaching of students from Sudanese universities. It's very good. Mentoring research project with researchers in Sudan. Excellent idea. Online lecture and discussions, expanding and continuing ECHO initiative, great. And continue the ASAPA seminars, perfect. And then course on using satellite data to identify activities. Now that's really interesting. That'll be really interesting. Collaborative projects join current efforts to help Sudan. And we had some talks today, I guess, so that could be reaching out to the folks like Dr. Suleiman Baldo and Dr. Nuruddin Sati and so on. Join UCANA in planning for post-war reconstruction of universities, excellent. Be part of the Declaration of Principles and push for being a part of negotiations. Okay. Very good. I think we have very interesting thoughts. This is saved already, so that's the beauty actually of using such tools, because we're not going to lose any idea that was presented or developed today, and we can always build on it. So if you have logged in, when you log in again, you have access. You can, if you think of other ideas, please go ahead and write and continue that effort. That's a good collaborative tools that we can utilize. Anyone wanna say anything? This could be a good time now to do it. Please raise your hand. I'll make you a panelist, or if you are a panelist already, if you wanna say anything before we wrap up for the day. We have another nice program tomorrow as well. So Bakri, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if Salman Baldo is still around, because I have a question.
He left, I think.
Okay. My idea is to use the Declaration of Principles as a document with which we can go and address the senators in our states for intervention to support the civic associations in all aspects in Sudan, whether to stop the war, whether to rebuild, whether to so I think last in 2018, 2019, we used the declaration of the Forces and Freedom and Change, and it was a powerful document. So now that we have this collective document, I think we could use it the same way to mobilize some support from the international community.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like Nathaniel said earlier in the presentation, right, we need to push for the Congress and senators and otherwise there is no demand to do anything.
Right.
Yeah, perfect. Any other last thought from anyone? All right, then with that, I thank you all for coming today and for the...
Dr. Montasir, I'm really sorry. I just wanted to say one thing. I didn't write it down, but about tools.
Sure.
I shared this earlier with Dr. Yasmin. I tried to, for example, to pay for 2 years ahead, but there wasn't any option like that. And also in other associations, there is also an option to donate money. So is there a way to update that website to allow for people who would like to pay more than 1 year, as well as make donations? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a place. I'll share that now.
Okay.
If you go to the ASAPA website, and then you go to get involved, then there is donate to ASAPA.
Oh, okay.
And then when you click there, you will see that here is a preferred initiative. If there is any initiative that you would like that donation to go to, and then the amount, you write it here. And then you can do a PayPal or Venmo or a debit or credit card.
All right. Thank you so much for, maybe I use my phone. I didn't use my laptop. Maybe this is clearer. Sometimes the phone is very limited, the space. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you very much.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you for your contributions today.
My pleasure indeed, always.
All right, great. So I'll hope to see you all guys tomorrow and bring more people to attend. The nice thing about this is that it's all recorded and it will be on the website as well, so that it remains as a resource for all the ASAPA members. And with that, thank you. See you all tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, man.